Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's parcel program update. I'm Bob, the person who doesn't know how to take the mute off, and I'm the GIS program manager here in Bismarck. I work with North Dakota Information Technology for the state of North Dakota. I'm also the project manager for the state for the parcel program. With me today is Michelle. She keeps me on the straight and narrow. Michelle's the principal and senior project manager for AppGeo, our contractor, and she's also the project manager for AppGeo on the parcel program. So anyway, reason we're here today, I guess the next slide there, Michelle. The purpose of today's webinar is mainly just about getting the word out or keeping the word out about the work being done on the parcel program. Michelle and I want to keep everybody in the loop on our goal of maintaining the statewide parcel data set, which is essentially the parcel program. And so today's webinar is part of a series of ongoing webinars that are planned that we've done in the past, and then also emails that will continue as well. We also know that the people here at today's webinar have a variety of reasons for attending. Some folks are users of the data, some folks are providers of the data, some folks are from counties, from state. Anyway, it's all over the place, and maybe some people are just curious. So what Michelle and I will try to do as we're going through the slides, wherever it makes sense, if we think there's a point of interest, we'll try to call your attention to that to match for those reasons for attending the webinar, just to kind of give you a heads up, if you will. So anyway, today's agenda will cover a number of things. Maybe some have been mentioned already, but it bears repeating. We've got some new things as well. Please hang on. And also, if you do have questions as we go, we'll try to monitor the chat. And then we'll try to respond to those as best we can, either through the presentation or save them up towards the end. So we'll try to keep an eye on that. And you probably saw, but just as a quick reminder, this presentation is being recorded. So Michelle?
Thank you, Bob. So we're going to first talk about why this program is important, and just a little refresher on that, and why parcel data should even be made available like this. It's nice to have that foundation of understanding so we're all on the same page. Well, based on my experience working with parcel data for nearly 16 years, there's just so many different uses and benefits for this type of information. And this slide lists some of them, but it's definitely not an exhaustive list. And it does apply to many or even all of the states in the country, not just North Dakota. On the left side, you'll see some state agency use cases, and North Dakota can be included on many of these examples. This would include things like site planning or assisting in disease outbreak, enrollment of lands into the state programs, updating administrative boundaries, for example, city boundaries, assisting in the collection of centrally assessed taxes, such as pipelines. Also, state police could use the statewide parcel data in CAD systems, and they can use that to assess property boundaries and ownership for 911 calls. Department of Corrections could use boundaries to ensure that sex offenders are housed a legal distance away from schools. That's an example that came from the state of New York. Emergency management or Department of Environmental Quality divisions, they could use it for natural disaster planning and response. It also expedites federal aid for disasters by having current data on hand in case of an emergency. And on the right are some of the county use cases. And this includes making it easier for developers. It includes supporting emergency response and mutual aid situations, or improving the public's experience. If it's easier to access data, then that also means there's reduced data requests to the counties. And not to mention the unintended consequence of data improvements that can be due to the state providing information about the quality of the data that they receive, and that quality information being shared back to the counties for data improvements. So this is just a few to highlight, and there are lots more examples.
All right. So the parcel data has been out for almost a year now, publicly available. And I have to admit, there's probably been more than one time I've like, wow, this is a lot of work. It's like taking a lot of time. And then I think about what the data providers go through as well. I think about maintaining the systems, and it's like, anyway, so then we start seeing comments, we hear back from people, and it's all worth it. And so this is just a sampling of some of the comments that we receive. It's not all of them, and I'm not going to read through them, but basically I just want to point out that we're getting input from companies inside and outside of the state. We're getting comments from state agencies and counties, and so forth. So I think a theme that comes through as well is that increased efficiency and time savings. I think those are two big things. And Michelle, if you could go to the next slide, please. There's a lot of text here, so it sits on its own slide. There's a lot here as well. But I think in addition to the whole thing about the opportunities that come through for the counties and the state by having the data, it kind of points out in that second paragraph talking about not building fences around data. And I kind of like that term because I think our concept is just natural to GIS in general. We tend to think of sharing, and by having publicly available open data, those fences or barriers are torn down, and that's really going to help people out. And so I really appreciate comments such as what Roger's provided here. So anyway, just gives you an idea. Next slide, please. And here's an opportunity that we're always learning. I know I've heard from people or I've seen them doing stuff with parcels. I had no idea. And so here's an opportunity or invite you to maybe share with us some of the ways that you've either seen or heard, or maybe yourself have been using the parcel data, maybe some of the benefits that are being realized. If you could chat those comments, that would be fantastic. And if you'd like to be contacted later for some kind of follow-up, just let us know, and maybe for efficiency's sake, just include your email so we can be sure to capture it. Michelle, is there anything else you'd like to say to this point?
No, I think you covered it. I think, as if people submit any ideas or benefits per this request, we'll kind of monitor that in the chat, and maybe we'll pick out a few to talk about later.
Yeah, and if I could just inject, I probably meant to say this too. It's like these comments are good. We don't do them just to get pat ourselves on the back. We intend to, just as we've seen in these previous slides, to utilize those comments so that the idea is when we go to the state legislature for continued funding for maintenance and stuff, we can demonstrate that it's not just for state agencies. There's other parties involved and other beneficiaries. So we'll try to collapse those or pile them into something that we can then use during those sort of hearings. So thanks, Rory. I saw your chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So.
All right. So we'll go forward here a little bit more on why parcel data and why this program is important before we get into the nuts and bolts. So aside from the compelling potential uses and benefits for having the statewide parcel data, there's also a lot of good reasons to make sure that the data is or stays publicly available. So that last testimonial that was on the screen spoke about how North Dakota, like all states, competes for economic development sites, resources, and innovative projects and jobs, which require open access to parcel data. So in North Dakota, we're in a pretty great position because all of the counties have made their data available, and we want to keep it that way. So to all the counties and data providers out there in the audience, thank you very, very, very much. We couldn't do this without you. And we want to keep it this way, and we want to keep it open. So why do we want to keep it open? Well, people today now expect access to information and it to be readily available online. And they expect the government to provide transparency into the data they have as well. So those are a couple of reasons. But Other reasons too are standardized parcel data is really beneficial for analysis across county boundaries. And that is a major reason to have it statewide. This slide is showing some examples from the New York State GIS Association. They held a webinar that highlighted their data-driven analysis of the benefits to counties that open their parcel data publicly. And in this study, they reviewed the web analytics information that they had on the downloads of their statewide parcel data. From that, they were able to learn a lot. They learned that many of the downloads were from businesses. And it's interesting to see the variety of businesses and the types that there are, but the common theme is that they're likely looking to site a new location. So for instance, a grocery store or retail distribution. They did find that one of the businesses that downloaded their data was actually Amazon. And then later, Amazon built a new warehouse facility, which brought in 800 full-time jobs and estimated $1.5 million per year in tax revenue. They also heard from the Empire State Development Agency that there's a premier site selection firm that basically just excludes counties from consideration if their information isn't easily available. And that aligns exactly with that that previous testimonial on the slide before this one also. So another example from New York State's use cases that they learned about was for forest land protection. The Conservation Fund had used the open statewide data to identify privately owned forested parcels that they could purchase in order to make a connected corridor of protected forest land. So that's a pretty great use case. And another one was for a view shed analysis for placing a new cell tower, which would minimize the visual impact of the tower's placement. And this was being done by a one-man business doing this by himself. He spent tons of time trying to get the parcel data from the counties that were missing from the state's data. And, you know, he felt he was doing a really good job for the people who would actually benefit from the tower and from that analysis. But he was just a small business owner doing it on his own, and he needed it to be easier and faster and free. So, those are some examples. Oh, and they also found that it was being used for broadband internet access expansion, and that aims to get quality high-speed access to every corner of the state, especially in rural areas. Parcel data is a piece of getting that to happen more quickly, to get the grant money for the broadband expansion. Having access to parcel data and doing analysis on the unserved and underserved populations makes the process easier and quicker. So we're going to look a little bit behind the scenes now that we've talked on all the whys. We're going to talk about the whats. So we've touched on some of this before, but we also have some new info. So some of you might recognize this a little bit. Just before getting into all the goody stuff, I just wanted to touch on a couple of key terms that I'm going to probably say a million times. So I want to make sure you know what they mean. Schema and ETL, two key terms. So schema is the structure of the contents of the data file. So a data file is submitted to us like the tax roll file or the parcel polygon GIS layer. The field names and the field types and the domains or the valid values that are used in those fields, all of that is the structure of the data file, and that is what is referred to as the schema. ETL is an acronym that stands for extract, transform, and load, and that is a process that we've built that gets the data from a county's format and schema into the state's format and schema, with all the county's data eventually in one data set for the statewide parcel data set. So the ETL is the process that we built. So what is actually happening when the county's data is submitted to the state? Well, first it's submitted either by MoveIt, which is the state's file transfer system, or it's being harvested on a defined refresh schedule from a location that we know of already. And then the automated process kicks off the ETL, and that processes the data into the statewide data set. And then when it's complete, there's a success notification email that's sent to us and to the county contacts that had been identified to receive the notification. If it fails, then we're notified and we will get in touch with the county to discuss the issue that caused it to fail and what those next steps could be. So that's kind of like the overarching process that happens. But then going a little deeper into what's actually happening behind the scenes once the data is submitted or harvested, there's 4 general steps that exist for each of the 53 counties in the ETL process. So step 1 imports the raw data into the state's enterprise geodatabase. Step 2 compares that raw submitted data schema to what it's expecting for the county. And if it's good, if it meets what it's expecting, then it will go ahead and standardize the data to match the state's standard parcel data schema. But if it notices that there's a difference in what was submitted from what it was expecting, then the process is terminated. And this is when the county will hear from us because we'll be requesting either a new data submission with the schema fixed, or we'll confirm with them that the new schema that they supplied is actually what we should expect going forward. And if that's the case, then we'll go ahead and update the ETL to expect that next time too. And then we have step 3, that runs some further validations on the data. That runs the mismatch analysis and a county boundary comparison and some other validations that we're going to get to in a little bit. And that puts it all in these reports that are available for the county and their vendors. And I'm going to talk about those reports here in a little bit. Finally, step 4 then aggregates all that standardized county data into the statewide data set.
All right. So Michelle's taken us through what I consider to be the gory behind the scenes details that result in baking the cake of which is the data set that the agencies can then use. And I think, as she's pointed out, those behind the scenes activities help us gain a better understanding of everything that's going on to process the data. And she's done a nice job explaining what happens, validation, but it also refers to some flexibility we have in the system. So like she said, if something's changed in the schema, let us know, and with some work, might range in level of difficulty, but the system is flexible enough to manage those sort of changes. But now I'd like to put a little bit of frosting on that cake by basically reflecting a little bit on the processes that happen once that data is all in there. So basically the final steps that are taken to make the data publicly available, and then maybe run some other things as well. So by doing this, I kind of want to present this as a means of kind of providing some framework on the time frame that's involved. So for example, when the data comes in, as she's pointed out, right away the processes start churning and chugging along, and eventually find their way out to the database. But if we were to compile everything every time, it would just be overwhelming. There's too much data to process. So we have like scheduled processes that run either daily or weekly and whatnot. So this kind of gives you a brief synopsis. So every morning, the system scans or basically collects all those validation reports that Michelle touched on, and she'll dig into some more details here in a bit. So it updates that on the Parcel program website. And then every Sunday morning, it's going to update the date imported status maps on the Parcel program website. And that's going to be also discussed in just a bit. And then every Sunday night, what everyone's always waiting for is the data is updated on the Hub data portal. That's the public data access. So anyways, kind of wanted to show on that. So this little refresh chart is something that Michelle compiled some time back. It's been updated to reflect our records. So some of you probably have seen this before, but we need to look at it again. It was set up initially when the project first began by sending out a survey and people telling us what they would like to see for their data being updated, what sort of schedule. And then we've made changes since then, and we'll continue to do so as needed, as we're told or asked to do so. Normally, the tax roll and parcel data kind of on the same schedule, monthly, weekly, whatever, or maybe not weekly, but yearly, something like that. There are some differences where if a vendor's got a nice automated updated system, maybe churning out a tax roll, sending it out on a scheduled monthly basis, we'll see some of that. But if you do need a change of preference, or if you're wondering like, well, what's up with that? You've got me down for monthly. I don't think that's right. Please let us know. And then as noted on the slide, if anything changes in your environment, like, hey, now we have this site, we have an open data site, please let us know, because then oftentimes I'll save you some time, I'll save us some time in terms of who provides data and how we consume it. So Michelle, if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is something quite new. It's still kind of warm. It's new enough, but on the Parcel Program website, there's like a little yellowish looking background button. It's called View Status Maps. So you click on that, you can see two maps along with some explanatory information. This information is updated weekly. It's already changed since this screenshot was made. But it looks at that schedule that we just looked at and compares it to when we last imported the data, and that's what's reflected here. So county and data providers can look at this and to check on the status of the update, like, whoa, I thought we were updating more often. What's up with that? And then also users of the data, like, whoa, kind of getting old here, or wow, this is nice, it's nice and fresh. But it's important to note that this is when the data was imported, not last updated, or in terms of edited, I should say, from the data provider. But we here are going to use these to identify where maybe an ETL process isn't working. It's like help us, find something quicker. And then also if there's something a little dated, then gives us an opportunity to reach out to counties and see if there's something that we can do to refresh the data. This is all part of, as we get into the current phase, it's more of a maintenance cycle. We're getting into, this is gonna be one of our new focus points, is to get the data more current. So anyway, next slide, please.
All right, so thanks, Bob. Now we're going to talk about a bunch of different resources that are available to the data providers to help with this process. So first off, I'll just say that the highest priority for the state is, for this data set, is long-term repeatability. And to manage that and keep the ETLs running, it's going to depend on ongoing data maintenance and consistent schemas by the counties providing the data. So as you saw in an earlier slide, step 2 of the ETL process is very dependent on having the consistent data schema. So to assist the counties with continuing to provide a consistent schema to the state, we are providing what are called schema sheets. So schema sheets are now available for download on the Parcel Program website. You just go to that website there and scroll down to the bottom where it lists important information for the county and vendors, data providers, and you can download the schema sheets. These schema sheets basically look like what's shown on the slide here on the right. They basically just document the field names that were provided by the county for both the parcel polygons and the tax roll data. And the ETL relies on and expects to see these same fields each time it processes the data. So the ETL might fail if some of the key fields are missing or are spelled differently than it's expecting. So if you're a county or a vendor and you are planning to make a change to the format of your data or your schema, just please notify us, and that way we can adjust the ETL accordingly. And if you don't let us know, that is not the end of the world, because what'll happen, like I said before, is the ETL is just going to fail. And then we'll be reaching out to you about it anyways. But the preference would be to be proactive about it rather than reactive. So these schema sheets soon are going to be updated on an automated schedule of weekly in a little bit. I think that's the next to do on our task list right now, is to get these schema sheets online weekly. But right now you can just go to that website and download the latest version that's up there. Another helpful resource for the data providers is this data submissions instructions document that's also available on the Parcel Program website. And this should look relatively familiar to some of you who may have been on a past webinar. We sent this out, but it's now on the website as well, and it's been updated more recently. So this is like a one-pager. It's a handout that it discusses the refresh schedule that we talked about. It points you to the data submission requirements and the schema sheets, and it tells you how to access the statewide data also. There's also guidance on where to go for more information and how to get help. All right, back to those validation reports that I mentioned earlier. So for the county folks on the call, some of you might have previously talked with or emailed with my coworkers, Russell or Rebecca, about these validation reports. So that might sound a little familiar to you if you remember those phone calls and emails. So these are a resource for identifying any potential parcel data enhancements that could be made. So we see this as kind of like a feedback loop for the data improvement. So you give us your data, we process it, we say, oh, look at this stuff in here, and then we send back to you information about what we see in the data. And you can use that over time to help improve your data. So these show what we've seen, and they might actually enable us to say, oh, that doesn't seem right, let us fix our ETL process. Or they can give you a county an opportunity to reflect on the data and maybe improve your process or data if you're the one generating that for us. So the ETL process generates these reports each time it runs and processes any newly submitted or harvested data. And these reports are also available online, also through the Parcel Program website. So you can find the link at the bottom of the program's page. It's called County Parcel Data Enhancement Files. And it'll bring you to a new page with links for each county. So to download a report for a given county, you would just click on that county's name, which is a link to download the zip file, download that file to your computer. And then when you open up that zip file, you can review the 2 spreadsheet files that are inside it. So I will discuss these 2 files in a minute. These 2 spreadsheet reports, they are updated on the website daily. So if you submit, if you're a county or a vendor and you're submitting data today, tomorrow you'll see that you've got new validation reports available to look at and see what's going on. On the same page, there's also a link for a PDF at the top of the page, and that has detailed information about the reports and gives some suggested recommendations for how you can resolve some of the issues being reported. So if you're a county and you're interested in continuously improving your data, these reports could help you do that. A little bit more about these reports, just because there's a lot there. So in the zip file, there's 2 spreadsheets. The validation report and the mismatch report. So the mismatch report, I'll start with first. That has up to 4 tabs or sheets in it, depending on what kind of mismatches exist. So if your county data doesn't have a particular type of mismatch, then that tab won't be included in the spreadsheet. So like I said, there's 4 types of mismatches that would be reported. There's the parcel polygons that have no matching record in the tax roll data set. And then there's tax roll records that have no matching record in the parcel polygons data set. And then there's a duplicate IDs or non-unique IDs in the parcels data set. And then there's one for duplicate or non-unique IDs in the tax roll data set. So ideally, a county would have a mismatch report with little to no records in it. And that is actually possible if over time the data is continuously improved or adjustments to the county's export processes are made, for example, to not include certain properties that are known mismatches. And on that topic, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are working on trying to reduce the number of mismatches that are reported. We're trying to find ways to not include some known mismatches. Examples of those are centrally assessed parcels or exempt parcels. And that's actually direct feedback that we heard from the counties when Russell and Rebecca were calling everybody to talk about these data enhancement files. So we might need some help from the counties and vendors to get these reports reduced for those types of records. So please stay tuned on that. Take a breath. Okay, on the validations reports, there's also several tabs in the validation report spreadsheet. So the first is the overall validations. That's going to be a good place to start, as it gives some high-level information and can be used to investigate some of the issues before moving on to reviewing individual records. The key validation that it reports on includes number of invalid geometries, number of parcels with no tax roll matches, the number of tax roll records with no parcel matches. And then there's also a parcel features validations report. This one gives a report on invalid geometries, such as null geometries or self-intersections. If you're a GIS person, you know what that is. If you're not a GIS person, you don't have to worry about that. But you might want to tell your GIS person about that. It also reports on higher vertex count features and parcels whose boundaries fall outside of the county boundary feature, which is defined by the state's layer. Then there's a third report there, that's the tax roll feature validations report. And this reports on records that have unexpected values in the specific fields. For instance, zip code length. We expect the zip code to be a certain length. If it's not, it's going to be reported there. Same with missing values, missing total values. If total values are not provided, it's going to report on those records. Or if there's a discrepancy between the total value that is provided and what we are calculating as the total value based on the other values in the data, it'll report on those. And really importantly, it'll report on records that have missing owner names or property addresses, because those are very important attributes that we really want to have in the data and provide so much valuable uses to so many people. And then there's some other validations that are included in these reports. It talks about attributes that fail the valid values test and missing or potentially incorrect PLSS values. So all in all, there's tons of information in these reports, and we're always here to help. If you download one of these reports and you want to, walk through it with one of us to make sure you understand what you're looking at and how you can use it, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, Bob, turning it back to you.
Do you need a break?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll dive in a little bit on how to access the statewide data set. So Michelle, if you want to jump to the next slide, please.
Thanks.
No worries. So anyway, we have a little animated GIF thing. Basically, when people think of parcel data, I think people might think of it different ways, how to access it, for example. And I think one of the first ways to access parcel data is to view it and maybe search it. And so we've got, like any parcel viewer type of tool, we've got a tool that not only presents the data, allows one to add different layers or themes, pull them away, maybe change the base map out and do some markup. And so this is of use for not only the users or consumers of the data, but also the data providers, again, as a way to reflect that, hey, did you get my last update? And so to the project team, we've used this since day zero as a way just to check the quality of our work. And fact is, when we were first setting up the project, processing the data, we would use this as part of our QA process. It was extremely useful for that. And so the data behind the scenes is updated on a weekly basis. And our plan right now is to replace this with a different viewer. When we were rolling out the project, we had a very limited amount of time, and we didn't want to have to take time to build a viewer and the tools. And so AppGeo has this tool called MapGeo, which is very good. It did everything we needed to provide information, allowed us to do the markup. We use that quite a bit, like, hey, something's weird here. But now that we're basically starting to hit our stride in the maintenance cycle. We want to like streamline the data flow, simplify it, so that will be driving to the use of a different viewer. But anyway, so the viewer, there will always be a viewer, is how we see it, but it's a nice tool. So next slide, please. So to access the data in terms of, I want it in my device or in my desktop application, we'll start with like finding the data or finding it in the first place to use it for something. We do that through the GIS Hub data portal, which is accessible. You can either go to it with the URL that's shown here on the slide, or start out with the GIS website, which is in the upper left corner, the gisnd.gov. You select Hub Data Portal, and lo and behold, here comes the Hub Data Portal. And then once you're there, you can either do a search, like type the word parcel, and then you get a pull down as you see here. And then in the slide here, I've clicked on the NDGIS Hub parcels, and then the little screenshot there to the right shows up. One can also, when you're using this tool, sometimes there's good reasons for it, is you can scroll down through those little blue boxes, the different data themes or categories, and you'll find the land records category. If you click on that, you'll see a number of items. There's probably about 30 different layers in there, and you'll find parcels in there as well. And if you click on that, you end up in the same spot. So, okay, so you find the data. Next slide, please. And now we want to download it. It looks a little scary, maybe like a wiring diagram or something, but it's really quite simple, especially if I know more and more counties and entities are using the Esri's ArcGIS Hub, which is basically this. But anyway, in this case, once you find it, you'll see the parcels there. And near the bottom, you might see like parcels, or you'll see the tax roll. So in the screenshot here, I just show how if you click on parcels, you get another page comes up, you get a little map, you can zoom around and pan on that and get information. But of interest is a download. And there's that little, well, it's highlighted there in white, but it's like a little cloud with the arrow pointing down. Yeah, that's the one. You're really good at that, Michelle. So anyway, then the different file formats show up there on the left. And then you can select on that and then download. But of interest is you can also use a filter option. And so I show a filter option being used for both the parcel data and the tax roll data. So for the parcel data, which is of course spatial, the boundary data, you can set up like a spatial extent in addition to field filters, or tax roll, you specify what fields. If you want to pull it all down, the whole shoot match, parcels, boundaries, and tax roll all together, that zipped file geodatabase, or FGDB, FGDB for short, is your friend, and that will pull it down, and away you'll go. So yeah, I think that's it for that. Okay, streaming of data, or AKA web services. I think it's important to differentiate. Download, there's certainly use cases for that, but streaming, a huge advantage is that you are always connected to live data, the most current data. And so there's a couple of ways, in my view, of accessing or using this. Just want to point it out, we've got folks that maybe develop their applications or whatnot, and so this might be of interest. So again, back to that same parcel page, but instead of hitting one of those boxes down there for download, you can click on the view data source that's outlined there. And in doing so, you'll get a URL, the big fancy name for it. The acronym is REST. Or if you click in Open in ArcGIS Online, and you'll look for the little URL box that's shown there on the slide, and you click View, you'll get to the same URL, that big long thing. The purpose of that URL is you can drop it if you're a developer. You can drop it into your application, like say you're building a web browser tool of some type. You can also, if you're using ArcMap or ArcPro, you can click on Add ArcGIS Server and plop this URL into that, and away you go. So that works pretty good. However, if you are using ArcPro, and if you're like many of us, if we aren't, we should be, because the things are changing, right? But in ArcPro, it's very easy to use. So basically, if you click on that little in catalog, you click on the little portal link, and then you click on the cloud, and you then type just basically as it's shown there. Hopefully, you can read it, ND GIS Hub, and then you can spell it out if you want. Or I'm too lazy, I just type PAR, and that's what shows up. The little prefix is handy because the ArcGIS Online world is a world. It's everybody's data, so we have a prefix in front of it to hopefully kind of sift out that stuff that's not belonging to the NDGIS hub. So that's where that's from. So if you can either find the data by doing as I've shown, or in that same little cloud area, you can click instead on groups and type in NDGIS hub. And then that will bring up a list of groups. And then if you double click it, expand it, like in this case, land records, you'll see a bunch of items in there, including parcels. So what's really cool, I think, is once you find the parcel data set, you bring it into the map. And then at that point, it's very similar to as if you had brought in your, I don't know, like a local file database, for example. You can do some queries on it. You can set themes or, colors, labels. It's very slick. And usually the performance is very good. So I just want to point that out. It's definitely worth trying if you haven't tried it. And anyway, enough said on that. So yeah.
Thanks, Bob. So we've talked about the why, the what, and how, and all of that. And now, communication and feedback is always very important in any kind of program. And we want your feedback. We want to make sure that this program, we can improve it. We want to make sure that it's successful. And for that to happen, we need support from all of you, the counties, the vendors, and the end users of the data. And the best way for us to get your support is to listen to you and act on your feedback if it's within our power to do so. So if you have feedback, please share it with us. There's a few ways to give us feedback. So if it's feedback on the program, such as a testimonial like those you saw as to why you're happy about the data set being available, or to provide info on a use case or the savings that the data has helped you realize, please use the feedback survey button on the program website. It's shown there on the top of the slide. And if you have other types of program feedback or requests for information, you could do that through either using the Contact Us form, which is on the bottom of the programs page, or you can email Bob at this email address. Now, if you have feedback on the data, such as a potential issue in the data or an idea for an improvement of the data, then you could, again, either use the Contact Us form, or you could submit a data issue through the Parcel Viewer. And there are instructions for how to submit a data issue through the Parcel Viewer on the program's website. So once we receive your feedback on the data, then what we do is we add it into our little task tracker. So we make sure that we don't lose it and we follow up on it and get it done. And then we'll determine if the issue is due to the source data from the provider, or if it's due to an issue caused by our ETL process. If it's an ETL process issue, it's in our control. So we'll work to find a resolution, and then we'll make the fix. We'll rerun the process, and we'll get that fixed data into the database. But if the issue is due to the source data, then we'll contact the county. We'll tell them about the issue, and we'll request that they fix it at the next time that's convenient for them to do so. First, we have a question here. Oh, no, that's you. Yeah, the slide's going to be shared for sure, and the recording as well. Thank you. So here's your first opportunity. Please chat to us any feedback that you already have about the program or the data. And of course, you can also contact us later, and we will be sure to get back to you on that. So please let us know what we can do better. Okay, Bob.
Okay. There's a lot of people. Just like in 1929, there was a person scratching their initials into a bluff north of Bismarck. They were part of a project. There's a lot of other names on that that chunk of sandstone. There's a lot of people involved in this project. You know, it begins obviously with the data providers, the counties themselves, and certainly their vendors. You know, it's like, I can't help but marvel at, you know, we're all short on time and resources. I can't help but marvel though at vendors and counties taking time out to work with us and to, you know, help us get the data into the system. Once it's in the system, I just want to shout out to some people that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I work for the information technology group, and we're repurposing much of the GIS Hub software and hardware. And so that then brings in sysadmins or system administrators, database administrators. So, you know, that makes it all happen there. And then we work closely, of course, with AppGeo, Michelle, who's here today and doing a great job of, you know, speaking for long periods of time without taking a breath. She's mentioned Russell and Rebecca, two key individuals. There's been others that have predated them that are still behind the scenes and so forth, but Russell takes care of the processes, the ETL and the systems. He gets onto the state systems and does his magic, and he and I work together on stuff. Rebecca, many of you, like Michelle said, you probably have talked with her already. She's doing data development and more outreach. And then the project team, who we've been associated with since day zero of the whole project. And just at the risk of forgetting somebody, but you know, some of the people that we still reach out, you know, quite frequently is a project team like Rory and Stacy and Kay and Brian. So it's just been phenomenal feedback. And like Michelle said just a bit ago, that feedback is what's needed. We do see a lot of stuff that we know we have to get done, but having that feedback kind of helps us set those priorities and keeps things between the rails. So anyway, I think that's it for that. All right, so we have some time for questions and answers. Maybe we've answered all your questions, or maybe we've created more questions in your mind. And I think, you know, again, on that feedback loop, you know, we'd be interested in knowing what's working well for you or for not, or how we can improve. I know there's been not many cases, but once in a while I might hear, it's been quite a while ago, but whoa, what's this about? So something I did wrong, I didn't get the word out, you know, sufficiently. So sometimes it's just a simple thing as letting people know what's going on. That's the purpose of things like this webinar. But, you know, I don't ever want to get making an assumption on something. So feedback is king. So now's a great time if you want. We've got some time here set aside just for this. If we don't have a chat answered, we can go to that. But if you'd like to as well, you can take yourself off mute and speak up, whatever works best for you.
I'm not seeing any questions from anybody. We could show the, oh, here's a message. What is that one? Cheryl says that she thinks it's a very worthwhile project. As someone who has less than a year as a tax director, I just haven't had the time to mess around with this much. I hope that changes in this coming year. Thank you, Cheryl. Anything you can do is hugely appreciated and very helpful. And thank you for coming today and giving us your time. Bob, should I show the mismatch and validation reports, or
no,
do you want to?
Don't do it. No. Yeah, if you could, and while you bring that up, I'll just mention to Cheryl too, is we have seen that in other counties, you know, where people come and go. And so I'm sure you are completely maxed out with stuff going on. If there's something we can do, like, can you give me, like, for example, you could ask a question to me like, can you provide some more background, or I have a specific question, or I'm meeting with the county commissioners next month, you know, I need some help, blah, blah, blah. Just, you know, feel free to reach out. Steve asked the hard questions. What % of the parcels have been captured? That's a really good question. I guess depends on how we measure. As a for instance, we do not have there's probably some questions in the tribal boundary areas that needs to be resolved. But probably the other one is where city boundaries are not yet present. Without getting into gory details, we don't have cities parcels for everything for all counties. There's a reason for that because we set out to do rural parcels. But having said that, there's been at least 2 cities now have contacted us to find out how they can include the cities. And so if you're one of those cities questioning that, please reach out to me. And that's kind of an early thing. So anyway, it kind of depends how we measure it. Like Michelle said, we have all counties participating. So looking at the next comment, can I keep going, Michelle? Or
Yeah, definitely. This is way more interesting than the report.
and if you're looking at the chat as well, Michelle, and you can easily improve upon what I'm saying, please do so. But
yeah.
But thank you, Anne, for your comment. Appreciate that. Hopefully, your agency was one of the very original reasons for doing a parcel data set, thinking about like surface water quality type of work, getting out into the landscape. So great use case to begin with. I see Sandy's question. I think I've answered. Yes, our target is rural, but and we know we have gaps in the cities because we didn't set out to do that. But if counties have included their cities, we've got those counties, or excuse me, we have those cities. But if there's a gap, like there's 2 cities that have approached us, that's something we're discussing now. So, Matt asked a good question. I like the monthly emails from the hub. Any way to include pressing topics or forum? Let's take that question. If you could contact me, Matt, to make sure I fully understand that. If it's city, county centric information that you're interested in, I don't want to misinterpret that unless you want to chat something else in there. Okay, thanks, Matt. Daryl said, oh, yes, Daryl, you're one. Daryl's asking regarding he's with the city of Dickinson, knowing if the rest service is going to work. That's what we're actually, Russell is digging into that now. Michelle and I had some discussions around that. I think at face value, Michelle might kick me underneath the table, but I think at face value it should work, but we're looking at how it would be implemented with respect to counties, frequency, and a number of other things. But having that rest service, I think that is key because we can harvest it. And as a side note, that other city that contacted us, they too have a rest service. So, yeah. So, all right. I'll keep watching the chat. Michelle, if you want to show briefly. And
are you seeing the spreadsheet?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So this is an example of a mismatch report. This is from Botanu. Did I say that right?
Close enough.
So you can see there's only 3 tabs in this report. That's because they don't have any non-unique or duplicate IDs in their tax roll. Very nice. So that tab is not in here, but they do have some parcels that don't have a match to a tax roll record, and they have some tax roll records that have no match in the parcel polygon layer. And then they have some parcels that have duplicate IDs in their parcel data. So you can see this example here. Obviously, they're using that as an ID, this unknown as an ID, and there's 31 records that have that, and that's a non-unique ID, so it's going to report on that. So yeah, I mean, this is essentially just an export of a subset of the fields that were provided to us, and if the record is listed in here, you can look up the ID in your data and try to see why that ID is not matching to a similar ID in the tax roll data set. And then, if you find that it's an error in the GIS data, you can make a change in your GIS data. If you find it's an error in the tax roll, talk with the tax director to make a fix in the tax roll data. And then when you've got some of these things fixed, you can resubmit your data and the mismatch report will have less records in it. Let me go to the validation report, and I might have to share this screen instead. Validations. Are you seeing the validation report?
Yep.
Okay. So this validation report will start with this overall validations tab. So it's just saying that, there's 17,967 parcel polygon features in the output. And there were 2 parcels that had invalid geometry. There were 2 parcels that had more than 300 vertices. And there are 178 parcels that had no match to a tax roll. This is a check for us internally. Yes, we have metadata on the parcel layer, and then those same statistics are repeated for the tax roll data set. So, and at the end, it identifies whether there's a one-to-many relationship present. So meaning like one parcel polygon on the map to many property records in the tax roll. If that relationship is there, then that'll say yes. And we try to handle for that in the ETL so that we get the matching done correctly. This is that parcel features validation report. So you can see that there's some, these fields here are the individual validations that it's running. So we can look at the filter and we're seeing, all right, well, attributes that failed the domain test, not really any of them. I'm not sure what that comma is for. I've got to look into that. But none of the records failed the domain test for attributes. But you can see that there's those 2 parcels that had more than 300 vertices. Those are the counts of vertices they each had. These are the parcels that that fall outside of the county boundary as defined in the state's data. So you could filter on the ones that say yes to look at what those are. And these are going to be the parcels that have null geometry, and it looks like there's not showing any there. And then these are the ones that have a PLSS discrepancy, meaning that the PLSS value that was provided in the parcel data doesn't match the PLSS values that are in the state's PLSS value layer based on the overlay analysis that the process is doing. And then there's tax roll feature validations. These are going to report on the owner zip length. So for the owner address zip field, if the length is if it's 0, it means it wasn't provided, I believe. And if it's less than 5, it's going to report that here because we are looking for a zip code of 5 digits. So you can see this one actually has some zip codes less than 5. Some of those I think we noticed are Canadian addresses because we need to fix the parsing on that, Bob. And then same with the owner +4 length, they should be 4 digits. Zip length for the property address and +4. These are going to be the parcels that are missing a total value. So if you filter on those that say yes, you'll see the records where there's no total value supplied. And same with the value sum discrepancy. So we're summing up the values of the the values from the other value fields provided, like land and structure value, etc. And if those values, that sum of those values doesn't match the value that was provided to us, it gives a yes there for that discrepancy. So just some ways to kind of call out maybe potential issues in the data.
Very good. We're on time here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it was worth ducking in a little bit just to see this. There's a lot of content here, and there's been some good chatting. If you could just bring that last slide up, I think. I guess I would just suggest to people while Michelle's bringing it up to maybe go out to the Parcel Program website. Got any questions on where to find it, please let me know. But basically, you can find it from the gis.nd.gov site and go to resources, and you'll see Parcel Program. You'll be led right into that. So yeah, if you could jump to the next slide there, and this is it. It's what I just said. So you can just go to there. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Just really want to shout out a big, huge thank you to the county vendors, the counties. Without you guys and gals, there's no way this could happen. Also want to thank all the users of the data, because we get feedback and it adds to the value of that. You know, in my position, we get the most value out of data if you can use it a bunch. You know, create it once, use it a bunch is a phrase I've heard from some others. So the more we use it, the better off we are, getting more value. So as it shows on there, the contact us, feel free, email me, use that contact. Anyway, this has been a fun opportunity to share with where we are. Again, we invite you to reach out to us if there's any questions. Thank you again. Michelle, do you have any closing points?
Nope, I'm sure everybody wants to go.
Nope. Thank you, Michelle, for keeping the glue on this.
All
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.